The amazing thing about this panel is you're getting ready to hear from several student founders, and they're going to talk to you about the journey of getting their ventures started, getting them off the ground, talking you through both the ideation process and the implementation process. My name is Emily Roller. I'm the Assistant Director of Programming at SciCity. All of these students that you're about to see came through SciCity's programming. And what you'll see, SciCity is a really, I think, special organization. It's my favorite organization on campus. It's all about bringing in the incredible diversity that exists at Yale, and we pull from students from every single school. We have students from all of the different grad schools, the undergrad schools, all sorts of different majors. You're going to see a great diversity of ideas up here on this panel as well. And we're here with the purpose of solving real-world problems. Right? Taking all of those things that we learn about in class, all of the theory, all of those ideas, and actually putting them into practice. And that can happen in a variety of different ways, but one of the ways that it happens is through founding companies, right? Founding organizations. And so the people that you're going to see today, you're going to see two separate panels. We're going to divide this time in two. The first panel that you're going to see, which is seated up here, is going to talk a little bit about ideation and about what that process is of like actually identifying the problems that they're excited about solving in the world and thinking through those. The second panel you're going to see is going to be talking about the actual implementation process, like the incredibly hard work it takes to go from this really exciting brainstorming session to actually getting the thing in motion. So I won't talk for too much longer. I'm going to turn things over to Swarnima, who's going to be moderating this first panel. Yeah, thank you. Whew, words. And I hope that you learn from this really amazing and inspiring group of student founders. So welcome, Swarnima.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us because, I mean, as is very common with the Innovation Summit, there is a lot to do. So thank you for choosing this panel during what I like to call nap time. So my name is Swarnima. I'm one of the founders in residence at SciCity. I built a company back in India, and I've been very fortunate to work very closely with these founders here at Yale and also several others. So, just to give you a little sense of what we're going to be talking in this panel, we are talking about ideation. Now, the reason why that's very important is because, as you all know, the founder journey, the entrepreneurial journey is a very, it is a little glorified out there, right? I mean, like being a founder or all of that. I think what we want to do, talk about at this stage is that, other than the passion, of course, like we start things when we feel passionate about an issue, we feel passionate about an opportunity or a market. But how do we really turn that passion into a process and see that, the idea is not just an idea, but it is something that's viable, something that can stand the test of time and stand the test of, changing markets, stand the test of customer rejection. And this all happens, of course, ideation and execution, they of course happen side by side. But we did want to, when we were discussing, this idea, we really wanted to, we understood that, a lot of people forget that, ideation is more than just about brainstorming, right? So I'm just going to start with Jaya. Is that okay? So I think the most fundamental question I want to ask is that, we all see things that we are passionate about. We all see a lot of problems that we feel that we want to solve, right? How do you, or how did you in your personal journey distinguish between an idea that you were just passionate about or just a passing fascination and an idea that you thought was worth dedicating years of your life to?
So this is such a good question because I am dedicating years of my life to this. I just graduated last week and I'm doing this full time. So, all in, and I'm doing it with my incredible co-founder, Emily, that you'll hear from next panel. So the inspiration behind Foriva, which is what Emily and I are working on, was deeply personal. I caveat that because you shouldn't just make a startup because it's of a hyperfixation interest to you. That's not always a great business plan. But if it's something you're passionate about and you test that with other people and it comes across as a strong unmet need, then you're kind of onto something. For me personally, so I have PCOS, what's now been called PMOS. And I really struggled to understand my body. I struggled to understand why my cycles were irregular, what that meant for my health. And I selfishly wanted a product that would explain that to me. And that product does not exist on the market. So I had the idea of let's create one that is. Now I went ahead and I tested that hypothesis and I spoke to many women. We're currently actually doing an NSF customer discovery grant. We have to do 100 customer interviews in 6 weeks. So if anyone here wants to speak to me afterwards, I'd love to hear from you. And the takeaway was that a lot of women feel dismissed by healthcare providers, particularly if they're struggling with PCOS or some kind of cycle irregularity, and that there's a mystification around how their menstrual cycle affects their health and also what happens in their body on a daily basis. I paired up with Emily, who's the brilliant biomedical engineer, and we created a smart toothbrush that analyzes hormones in your saliva. So even if you have an irregular cycle, you can understand exactly where you are and what that means for your overall being. Now, the question being, how did I decide to be the person to do this and dedicate my life to it?
Well, when you thought about PMOS, of course, PMOS and women's health is a growing market, but like what made you think that this is not just a passing fad, but this is an investable market for you
absolutely.
as a founder?
So we know that PCOS affects on average 1 in 10 American women. In countries such as India, it's as high as 1 in 5. So we know it's actually a huge market. On top of that, we know that the current treatments are not very satisfactory for a lot of women because the current treatments are just basically birth control or metformin. And if you don't want one of the two, then you're basically left with no option. So there was a strong unmet need in terms of what the solution looks like, right? And why I felt passionate that Emily and I are the team to do it is, Emily brings all the big brains and I just say I'm the talking head. But before I came to Yale, I was actually a medical negligence lawyer, and I worked a lot in medical malpractice, but also did my research thesis on women's health and women's reproductive device class actions. And so my background was understanding the products that we've brought to market for women historically and why they have not just been not good enough, but also at times harmful.
Thank you. Chris, hi. I think one of the things that really we talk a lot about, like Jaya spoke about customer discovery, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the execution segment. But what did the process of idea validation really look like for you? And the reason I ask that is because there is a lot of founder intuition that goes into it, and there is a lot of process also that goes into it, that there is a process through which you can validate your idea. Hopefully it's not always easy, but sometimes you can. So can you talk a little bit about how this process looked like for you? How much, what was the role of intuition? What processes did you put in place? What mistakes did you make in general? And what did you learn?
Hi everyone, I'm Chris. I'm also a recent grad out of SOM, class of 2026. So I run two different ventures. One is Rise Media, the other is Surge. Rise Media I've worked on for the last 5 years. It's a Asian American centric talent management agency. So over the last 5 years, we've done around $3 million in campaign revenue and managed over 500 campaigns. And then that kind of built into Surge. So Surge is the AI infrastructure behind the attention economy. So I think the connection point between those two ventures is a big part of this ideation validation process. So at Rise, I lived through all of these campaigns personally, and I saw the problems firsthand, and I saw how influencers weren't resonating with the briefs that they were being sent, and I saw how brands were constantly getting underperformance in their campaigns. And I saw that there was a gap in the market for something like this. And also with my personal experience working with these brands and working with these influencers, I had a lot of direct access to these customers. So it wasn't just I believed that there was this crazy solution that everyone else should kind of follow along. It was me going personally to each of the brands I've worked with over the last 5 years saying, hey, we're thinking about building this out. What would you recommend doing? Would this be something that you would want to implement within your own ecosystem and kind of figuring out what is the best fit there. So I guess to answer your question more succinctly, it's living and knowing the problem yourself, validating that through your own personal experience, as well as validating that through just direct conversations with the customers that you're going to be working with.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. And I think the two things, like the one thing that really came out in both of what you said, Jaya and Chris, is that, and this is a term that gets thrown around a lot, which is founder market fit. Not every person is equipped to solve every problem. It's not just about a question of passion. It's like really about what intuition have you developed while you have been occupying that space over a period of time. And that is also how I think when you are trying to raise funds or you're talking to your first set of customers, that's also how you end up de-risking, because you know that you've been in the space and you're a slightly de-risked founder that way. Laurie, and I think this is an especially important question, from the context of a healthcare founder, which is that, like we spoke earlier, that, entrepreneurship is a little romanticized, or the lens is a bit, distorted, the way that, founders and this whole journey is spoken about. I think what I would like to know is, what does the reality actually look like? What does a day-to-day really look like for you as an early-stage founder who is, not only validating idea, but revalidating idea with feedback, getting that early-stage traction and all those things? So what does the day-to-day look like? And also, how do you, how do you prioritize things, and, how do you do that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Hi, everyone. I'm Laurie. I'm the founder and CEO of Fulcrum Care. And we focus on engaging high-risk patients, like Medicaid and Medicare members, ensuring that they have access to dental care, because this has been a problem that I've seen historically, and that hasn't been solved. And also as a clinician, being in the dental industry for 14 years, I've seen it as a problem in the space that really there isn't a solution out there that is really hitting the mark. And so I will say that the reality for me personally, my journey has been making that transition from having a clinical background into stepping into the world of entrepreneurship, and really thinking about how I can show up in a way that can build and lead a team and create a solution that can be implemented. Because I will say that specifically in the phase of ideation, it's easy to get feedback that the problem that you're working on is a problem that's worth solving, but it's much harder to find a version of that solution that you can actually implement, that people are willing to pay for. And that's been the journey. I will say in the last year and a half that I've been working on this, and being a student as well, a lot of resources are available at Yale to pitch the idea, to get live feedback. But when you actually start building, that's when you start to get the real truth behind, is this something that can actually be implemented? And so I will say that the reality around working on this right now. So I also graduated last week, so I think we have a lot of grads here, which is awesome, because I know that we're all really focused right now, going full time into building our startups. But a big part of what that looked like for us is that we had to make a decision around the business model, and what part of the business model we were going to move forward with, and what we needed to do away with in order to de-risk the business model and actually provide something that people were willing to pay for. And for us, it's health plans. Those are our key partners, our health plans and dental practices that are really trying to provide better care to the lives that they serve. And so our service is focused on care coordination, so reaching out to high-risk members who haven't been engaged in care for a while, identifying the gaps there in access, and partnering with community centers or resources in the community to connect them to that resource, and making sure it could be transportation, and then making sure they're able to get into care. Initially, we were trying to be the care delivery organization itself. And we just realized that this is actually a very, very risky model to try to launch upfront. It's very expensive to implement, and so thinking around, what is the MVP, the minimal viable product, right? The least risky version of what we actually are trying to do. What does that look like? And that's where we had to start. And so I'd say that to answer your question, it's not, I think the glorification of entrepreneurship, of being something that's sexy, is not the case. It's very scary. And so it's just being able to really adapt. And again, just making sure that you prioritize, because that's truly what's driving you, right? You don't want to lose sight of the vision and why you're doing what you're doing, but you need to be able to adapt and be flexible to implement in a way that actually will be paid for. So that's what it does come down to.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. And I think this is something that's a very alive conversation with all of us, when we're talking about, that a problem, any interesting problem statement can be solved in several different ways. And I think the biggest question then becomes, as you rightly said, how do you present a solution that people are willing to pay for, if that's if it's a consumer facing kind of company or a enterprise facing company, but also like just what can be commercialized. And very soon you realize that ideation is so much to do with like real market strategy. And that's and I think that is a very important part, because and I'll come to you, Samantha, because you I think have been generating revenue since day one. You've also you also dealing with questions of production, scaling, various other things. So I think my biggest question is that at this stage, at the earliest stage, you have traction now, but before you had traction, before you had funding, or before you had a lot of external forms of validation, because let's face it, I mean, funding is a form of external validation, right? But before you have any of that, something that counts, how do you not only keep your energy going, but how do you really strategize with very, few resources at your disposal? And the resource also being time,
Yeah, thank you for that question. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam, and I am the founder of Calmware, a tactile-led wellness brand that helps you regulate your nervous system in real time using handheld, small, physical products that are completely analog and rely on tactile stimulation, guided breathing, and now integrate with guided meditation as well. And so I started similarly to a lot of my fellow founders, where I was solving a problem that I myself had. When I came back to grad school here at SOM a couple of years ago, I was really struggling. I've experienced a lot of anxiety throughout my life. Many of us do, but I also have ADHD, and it was just really difficult getting back into the space of being a student. I had been out of school for about 7 years, so it was pretty unfamiliar at that point. And I was also really self-conscious about my peers recognizing that I was struggling and that I needed some sort of something to ground myself or fidget with. And I have also had a personal practice as a potter for most of my life, so I started just kind of messing around in the studio and making these tools for myself, bringing them to class, and seeing how helpful they could be, and how I was finally able to have the type of tactile and physical anchors that would not just help me practice a lot of the guided breathings that I had learned through years of therapy and coaching, but also remember to use them in the moments when I needed them most. And I knew immediately that these tools worked for me, but it was really kind of the first summer that I spent working on it, going to every single craft show or farmer's market that would have me, just talking to other people, presenting my wares, really sparking conversations about anxiety and ADHD and the impact that it can have on us within different types of environments that not only help me realize that, okay, other people understand how I'm applying these types of grounding techniques and how they can be really helpful, but also people are willing to pay for this. So pretty early on, I was able to start generating revenue just on a small scale at these markets, but it gave me also some initial revenue that I could reinvest and kind of continue to buy more materials, scale more, make more product, go to more of these markets and places where I could then talk to more people and continue to get more feedback and iterate kind of continuously. And it's definitely been a lot about just having these conversations, listening to the stories that people are telling me after they've been able to use the products, try them out. I did a lot of farmers markets where I would maybe go to an initial market earlier in the summer and then try to go to that same market later in the year because a lot of people frequent them. So I was able to talk to my customers 3-4 weeks later and say, oh, are you actually using this? Is it actually helping you? And understand, okay, these aren't something that people are just, putting in their junk drawer and then never taking out again. It's things that were living on their bedside table, being a really prized keepsake on their keychain, things like that. So it started to give me some of that just initial validation. And then as things have evolved, what's been really exciting is to understand the different ways that I could collect data and really validate the impact that these techniques and these products are having on a physiological level. So looking to people who are wearing wearables that are already measuring biometric data and how they're seeing the actual impact of using the techniques and the products within that data. Looking at things like the amount of sleep that they're getting, what their sleep scores look like, and how that's been impacted by using Calmware, how they're able to really regulate their heart rate better. So seeing less variability there, especially in overstimulating environments when they're able to utilize the tools and the pieces. So it's been really about matching up first a lot of the qualitative data and just getting enough of that at scale for validation, and then really later kind of unlocking the use of more quantitative data. But to the point of, starting to scale up and figuring out how to work with really limited resources, it definitely was a challenge for me early on. And I realized pretty early on that my handmade, kind of hand-built production wasn't going to scale. So almost after the strong success that I had and demand that I saw the first summer working on it, I immediately shifted and learned a new ceramic technique that I wasn't familiar with, which was slip casting. So instead of just rolling out and hand building each piece, I learned how to create molds out of plaster and then how to cast, so taking liquid slip, pouring it in, and then the water's drawn out of the clay so it firms up. But that allowed me to not only create more kind of consistency in the initial kind of structure of the pieces, but also to continuously kind of create more molds and be able to turn them over at like a defined rate, so I could have an understanding of, okay, like what is an output that I can actually be producing at, how many more molds do I need to make to be able to increase that output and start to kind of make small progress towards scaling.
Absolutely. No, I think, and I mean, having seen that process, I can attest to how difficult it was. And another thing is that, so basically, I think to summarize, if I may, do that, I think the ideation process is, I think, what I'm hearing from all of you and what has been my personal experience as well, is that, a lot of, you're still ideating for many, many years. It doesn't like stop. There are several times, the process that you described, this was like a 1-year process at least. And during this time, one also has to be mindful that, what is the other competition looking like? Will your market survive, beyond 2 years? And this is with the advent of AI, this has been a very real question for a large categories of companies that, will this category survive or will this be unrecognizable 3 years from now? So how do we future-proof our stuff while having no funding and maybe no co-founder and maybe interns. I don't know, So I think what really helps is to, like turning passion into a process and, like having very timed milestones. Of course, none of those time milestones, I mean, the time always kind of is iffy about all of this, but, knowing that ideation is about customer discovery, about really looking at your market, how do you reach that market, which we call go-to-market strategy, also thinking about commercialization, also thinking about plan B. All of this is a part of ideation. So a question that I want all of you to answer one by one is starting with whoever. Let's do Samantha now because we did Jaya last time. What is that one very critical action that you would advise people to take at this ideation stage? And by critical action, I mean anything. It can be, using a certain kind of tool or reaching out to a certain kind of mentorship framework or a customer discovery, whatever, like a very critical action that people must not miss during this period or during this stage.
Yeah, I would just say talk to your customers and like not your friends who fit the demographics of your customers, like people you don't know who, have no reason to be nice to you or just like say that they like your idea.
And can I just ask a quick follow? I mean, you can answer other people as well. I think you're exactly right. There is so much bias and so much confirmation bias that enters into the customer discovery process. It's a very big problem. What is the way in which you have reached out to, like, how have you put yourself out there and reached out to people so that you are finding strangers to talk to?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was getting out of the Yale kind of bubble and ecosystem and going to towns where I didn't know anyone, where I was like completely unfamiliar with them, and just like setting up a table and talking to people, seeing if they were interested in buying my stuff, asking them about how they manage their stress, if it was something that they experienced or got in the way of being able to accomplish things in their life that they wanted to. So yeah, just getting out of whatever your comfort kind of
bubble,
normal environment is. Yeah, or if there's
exit you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Chris. Sorry, whoever has them.
Yeah. Do you want to go? Okay. You kind of stole mine. I was going to say talk to your customers. But I guess my second one would be always understand why. Whenever there's like either a yes or a no from your customers, just always understand why. Because I think at the early stage, you're going to get a lot of random suggestions from different groups of customers. Usually it's very specific to their own organization or their own personal needs. So you kind of got to figure out like, okay, no, I don't want to buy this. Why? Is it because you guys are actually already purchasing another product that's doing something similar? Is it because your problem is slightly different because of the way you're set up? Or is it because actually we're like not, hitting the right idea here? We got to make a pivot. So I think always figuring out why is really critical with every no and with every yes.
I have a couple of points. The first one that I will say that I've seen people express is when they're in the ideation phase, they are in stealth mode, and that means that they don't want to share, and they're very particular about who they're sharing their idea with, and I think that's actually a disservice because what's actually valuable about your idea is the ability for you to execute on it and for you to implement it and get paid for it. Just in the concept phase, it's actually not as valuable. And this might be different for tech, I don't know, but I would say I think it applies for the most part. If you actually haven't started working on the actual thing and it's just an idea phase, you don't want to be in stealth mode where you're like, oh, I can't tell you, because it's actually a turn off. People don't want to, if you talk to investors like that, it's like, okay, we don't want to, we don't want to talk to you. So I would say you want to pressure test your idea as much as you can. So be very open and honest about it. And then the other, I think I forgot my second point, so I'll let you go if I remember. Here you go.
So completely agree. The only caveat I would make is exactly as you said, deep tech. So being that the strong selling point of Foriva was a novelty of a toothbrush, before we filed our provisional patent, we only referred to it as like a biosensing device because, big medical device companies who have a lot more capital could get there a lot quicker, and we knew it was a great idea. So that's the only caveat. But we were still testing biosensing in saliva as an idea. I would say 2 points. Firstly, this is a bit epistemic. I would really ask yourself if this is a lifestyle that you feel comfortable with for a period of time, not forever. It's not the rest of your life, but for the next 1 to 5, 6 years. Are you okay with a lack of routine, a lack of somebody to report to tell you what to do? Like, are you comfortable, driving the ship and also all the anxiety that comes with that? On the flip side, if your answer is yes, then get a great co-founder, right? So entrepreneurship is hard, and having a partner is really helpful. And, there are days that I'm at 100% and Emily is at 99, and there are days that I'm at 60% and Emily is at 100, right? And so it's really important to have a teammate. I do also want to say, I don't want to cast entrepreneurship as like doom and gloom and super depressing, because people hear so much of that and it's so demotivating. It's also incredibly enjoyable, but I just think that you should be realistic about whether the way that you like to work and structure your life fits with the kinds of scheduling that startups have, and that you also have a person that you can rely on, and so you can motivate each other.
Laurie, do you want to?
I remember my second.
Okay.
The second one for people, this is again specifically in the ideation phase, is to beware about staying in the ideation phase for too long. And so once it gets to a point where you feel like you have enough validation and you need to kind of define that yourself, or maybe through partnership with, maybe some resources through SciCity, like what's the stage at which you say, okay, I have enough proof points here to start to actually build towards this. I would say try to get there as fast as you can. If not, you're going to ideate around something that is probably not the best. And then when you start building, it's when you start getting to like the 30,000 foot level to like the 10,000 foot level, and you start to realize a lot of things that actually just, may work or may not work. And so the faster you can get to actually trying to build the thing, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Bias for action, I think, at all times. And obviously, I think Chris hit upon a very important point that there is, in things like customer discovery, investor discovery, things like that, there is a lot of random noise out there. And I think it is very common to see that, this is what I thought that my ideal customer would be. And you realize, maybe not. This is not the segment that's really responding to me. And then I think a lot of the mistake that a lot of people make is that, no, they're not seeing it. Like this is a needed product or something, but they're not seeing it. I think that is, I just feel that my lesson always is that, the market will make you bend to its will. You can either go kicking and screaming, or you can listen to your customers and, respond to the market, right off the bat. So thank you so much. I think that was very, very elegantly put and very honestly and authentically put. We have time for 2 very quick questions, if there are any. Sure, please go ahead.
Question for anyone, but Laurie in particular. Can you describe a little bit of the tension between creating a product that delivers a good outcome, clinical outcome for the patient, and something that can make money and survive and raise money for your enterprise?
Yeah, so I would say that this is, we maybe talked about it a little bit earlier about the founder market fit and why that's important. Because when you have, in some way, really deep insight into the problem and a potential solution, being able to apply that solution in a way that really drives the outcomes that you want is going to be tied to that understanding and to that insight. And so for us, when it comes to working with underserved communities, really understanding what the needs of that community, what the needs are, and what are the barriers that have historically created the disconnect. And so as a clinician, I've seen that in practice, working with Medicaid members, Medicare members, members that have a lot of social needs, and seeing how the current industry just doesn't prioritize that, and that there are not a lot of solutions that have been implemented successfully. And so we really focus on addressing the social needs, because I see that that's really what's driving worse outcomes, is what we want to avoid, and that's really what differentiates us as a solution, as a product. And then, Dr. Chen, what was your second part? And maybe somebody else can answer that.
And finances and money.
Like, how do we finance it?
The viability of it, I think that's what
Yeah.
you're saying. How do you ensure the impact and the impact at scale versus viability
Yeah.
as well?
So I would say, and this is back to like initially what we were building was really focused on providing the better service for the patient, which fundamentally is, is really what the mission is. But understanding like who's actually going to pay for it. So finding who's the actual customer. The customer were going to be health plans, because they wanted to, and this is through conversations, right? So having conversations with different health plans that are in charge of Medicaid patients getting access to care, and seeing what they actually care about is coordinating the care for patients. So making sure that those patients have transportation to get into a dental office. Making sure that there's data that's being shared. So if a patient is able to get into an office, ensuring that we're sharing that success rate, that we are also tracking specific outcomes that they are also accountable for to the state. And so that requires us to have a very deep understanding of the system, and how our solution can be implemented in this system. And so through the conversations is where we were able to find that health plans are willing to pay us per member per month. And then once we have that, we're working on that right now, building towards a letter of intent. And then with that, we have just a lot more leverage to fundraise, which is the next step for us this summer.
Thank you. Miriam, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Miriam. Thank you all for sharing. I'm curious how you all utilize kind of like the unique time in your life as a student to take risks and imagine the business. Like, what were the trade-offs as you did that? Are there places where you maybe moved slower than you would have if you were just like operating in the real world, taking a break from a full-time job or something like that? I'm just curious, like, what were the things that you did along the way that you thought were really helpful, given the fact that you were founding a business as a student?
Yeah, I think that I've never really imagined myself starting a business before being a student and having this opportunity, but it felt like this is like the time to explore and take a risk. And that's where I kind of decided to use the summer between the 2 years in my program as that test to see, okay, is this something worth pursuing? Is this something that I should really put a lot more like energy and focus into, especially in my second year? And I also think that being a student and just having access to such incredible faculty and resources, there is so much opportunity that you wouldn't otherwise have. Things like being able to go to your professor's office hours and kind of use them as like a free consultant. companies pay so much money for a lot of our faculty to consult with their businesses, and we can kind of go do that for free. So taking advantage of all of those different people to just pick their brain, share your ideas, and get advice and ask lots of questions, and just kind of continuously absorb all of that like a sponge. And then at the same time, I also think being in an environment where like it's okay to fail. I was able to test a lot of ideas at Sci-City that didn't work out. So I think also just being in a mindset where it's like, this might be a really great idea, it might not be, but not being afraid to just like try it out and see how it goes is something that can be really rewarding, and you'll definitely learn a lot along the way, both about the viability of what you're doing and about yourself, and whether this is something that this is a lifestyle and a type of path that you want to go down.
Thank you. I will ask you, Samantha, to hold on to that mic because we will just smoothly transition into your panel. Thank you, Chris, Laurie, Jaya, and for all of you for listening. We have the second panel, and I will let Samantha take it from here. Thank you so much.
So we're going to transition now to talking about the execution stage. So I'd love for Emily, Ben, Henry, and Paris, and Swarnima, of course, to join me. Great. So now that we've talked a bit about ideation, kind of early validation of those ideas, I think this is where, things get real and you start to actually take big steps to build something that is sustainable, that can really scale and last. So I'm excited for everyone here to be able to share their perspective on kind of reaching these milestones and really starting to get their ideas off the ground. So I'd love to start with Ben and ask about kind of the moment when what you were working on stopped being just an idea and it started to become something that you were actually building, and what that shift was like for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Benjamin Barkoff. I'm a little different than everyone else. I work on a nonprofit. It's called Whiskey Bravo, and we work to improve the lives of U.S. service members while teaching high schoolers about service and leadership. So the process began for me. I started this at a pretty young age, and so became close with a Gold Star family that lost their son serving in Iraq. And was young at the time, didn't know what death was, and like the concept that someone gave their life for something bigger than themselves was hard to wrap my head around. And so I wanted to do something about it, and didn't have the intention of starting in a nonprofit at all. Just did little actions, and like lemonade stands, fundraising for other organizations, that sort of thing. But when it kind of switched was I was starting to look for like, is there ways that students, high schoolers are able to support our military? And there wasn't anything out there at the time that looked at students as catalysts for change, not just fundraisers. And so kind of just started reaching out to organizations and saying, hey, if I brought 20 friends with me, could we volunteer with your organization? And all of them were like, yes, we've never been able to get volunteers. And so I think it's simply just like making that call, seeing a problem in the world and wanting to do something about it, and starting small, not with like, at least for me, it wasn't some intention of something big. It was just saying, hey, I think I could have a real impact here, and making that call, taking that first step.
That's a great segue, I think, into the next question that I want to ask, and I would love to hear from Paris. So there's always a lot of planning that goes into starting anything, but I'd love to hear a bit about what one of the first really concrete things that you did. So not just getting stuck in that kind of planning loop, but actually making that shift to execution.
Hey everybody, my name is Paris, and I have built a platform for building multi-vendor marketplaces 100 times faster and cheaper than traditional development. So it's kind of like a no-code tool. We've now brought in AI to generate the front ends, which is really exciting and makes my job a lot easier nowadays than manually like either coding it or going into Webflow and spending hours upon hours to get the front end of these e-commerce websites set up. But in the earliest days, we were actually just a marketplace for a specific niche. So I just randomly picked one per the advice of advisors at the time to pick a niche and not spread yourself too thin. So it was beauty and wellness. I was in Pittsburgh. And the ideation phase was pretty short, luckily for me. And the execution began literally by going door to door to like nail salons and hairstylists and barbers and being like, hey, I built this thing. Do you want to use it for free? And that was a great way to get the first users. But I would really advise putting a price tag on the software as soon as possible, because that's when you'll get the real answers.
Yeah, but I love how grassroots your story starts, and it's just so important to be out there knocking on those doors, having conversations, and putting yourself out there. I think that for so many of us, that's what really builds a lot of resilience and comfort. Also hearing rejection, that just makes us that much stronger. So when we think of early execution, it is a lot of kind of uncomfortable situations and conversations and decisions that you have to make, and you're often making them with incomplete information. So Henry, you've worked with a number of startups and started different businesses. I'd love to hear from you about making some of those uncomfortable decisions, and maybe even kind of an example from what you're currently working on or from a past life about maybe something that you made wrong and that you were able to kind of learn from.
Thanks, Sam. So to introduce myself, my name is Henry Ritter. I am a recent graduate of the business school and the environment school here, so kind of an interesting little niche there. And as a kid, I also ran lemonade stands, but I used that mostly to fund Pokemon card purchases, so I think you've used your funding a bit better than I did. Anyway, to answer your question, what was it again? It was like basically uncertainty early on.
Yeah, exactly. So like incomplete information, having to make decisions, and then, learning from when you get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process really, I don't think it ever really stops, is you're not really sure and you're just kind of making the best guess you can. I've been working on a medical device for urology that has a major waste reduction component. I knew nothing about this space before I met my co-founder, who's actually a urologist here at the medical school. And we basically had to start telling a story about how this was a interesting business, but also obviously how it's important for the patients. And I think you have to make a ton of assumptions really early about who we think our customers are, why they're going to purchase it, how it's going to be priced, how is insurance going to handle it, what is our path for getting the next round of funding, and you really don't know. You're just telling your best story and you're getting feedback from how people react, and if people sort of look at you weird or question something, that was kind of the signal for me to go back to the drawing board and learn more about something. And so I think the lesson is you have to just hypothesis test and say, this is my best guess at what's going on. And as you learn that something you've decided was insufficient, you have to go back and learn more about it or rethink what you're doing. And it's okay to there's been a surprising amount of grace for not actually being sure or us changing our story. People have not held us to that very much, and I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really big, is that there are so many assumptions that you have to make early on, and it's also so important to be comfortable with those assumptions not panning out. So I'd love to turn to Swarnima next and talk about a little bit when you kind of go from assumption to more validation, and how you understood that you had enough validation to really keep going and start to scale something instead of pivoting and continuing to test.
Thank you, Sam. So just for context, I did not build as a founder. I was working on my startup in India, where I'm from, and it got acquired prior to my arrival at Yale. So there was there was not like a lot of luxury of time at the time, when me and my co-founder so it was a women's health company. We were building a D2C brand, nutraceuticals for women's chronic conditions. And I had built in the space before, and my co-founder also was from, a similar space. And I think one very important decision that we were making was that we don't have infinite time. And there is a certain amount of time during which we want to test out a few things. And it's okay if it is imperfect, but, we should, if we think that, we can pull this for another 5 years or something, and there is some investor interest or something like that, then we'll continue. Otherwise, we'll just learn our lesson, and say thank you and move on. So, because we both had quit our jobs and it was like we didn't have forever. So so basically what we did was that, as I think Henry said, we just, designed something that we thought was our best guess. We just thought that, women were struggling with a certain kind of chronic conditions, and our best guess at the time was that it was fragmented care. They did not get everything on one platform. Women had whole body issues, but they had to go to a gut specialist and a gynac and a dermat and a mental health specialist, all in separate, platforms with very separate journeys, tell their story again and again. And we just said that, why not? What if we just curate singular journeys based on people's age and a certain degree of personalization, lifestyle, how much time you can give, et cetera, et cetera. So we basically designed a personalization engine and created a few, healthcare pathways, and we just started selling this. We had the advantage of having a lot of practitioners in our network, so that was not, the supply side was not very difficult for us. The demand side was very difficult for us. We got rejected a ton, but and that was mostly me on the consumer calls. It was very depressing, and it really was a very hard time. But I think we had enough. I think we were able to build enough traction for people to say that, okay, this could become something. It needs like a lot of change, a lot of like pivoting here and there, but there is a real community out there. So I think that is when, and I will just share the story with the caveat that this was a consumer health company. This was consumer focused. This is not a transferable kind of action for all kinds of companies, or, in deep tech or with AI or with, say, nonprofits and things. But for us, it was very clear that because we're building in the consumer space, we need to show some revenue traction, even if it's not that much.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think the time is always ticking, right? As soon as you start executing, and the time's ticking as you are trying to show traction, the time's ticking as you're trying to build and actually have an MVP to put in front of customers. And there's just always more to build than there is time to build it, is what it feels like. So, Emily, I'd love to hear from you about how you decided what mattered most first, especially balancing research and then trying to turn that into something commercially viable, solving a problem. What did that prioritization look like for you?
Sure, thanks. Hi, my name's Emily Deshane, and I'm a PhD student in biomedical engineering, and I'm actually defending my thesis this next coming month. So things are about to get a little bit easier in terms of how I prioritize my work. I also previously worked in the biotech industry, where I was developing processes for manufacturing biologics and scaling up those processes for manufacturing. And so I would say it can be kind of complicated in how you prioritize when you're starting a scientific project, what comes first. And I think it's hugely important, especially in the sciences, to make sure you have great advisors, people you can go to get advice from. So Jaya and I really made it our focus to find people to work with and find these partnerships, and so that we had a clear path forward for when we hit roadblocks, that we have knowledge experts that we can really lean on to kind of troubleshoot all the kinds of problems we're going to find along the way. And then in terms of where to start, also getting patent protection. So we filed our provisional this past year, and having this provisional enabled us to really be openly talking about our science and developing these partnerships where you can have some kind of knowledge protection. And so those were the first steps. And then I would also say you need to have a lot of initial validation studies that what you're doing does work.
Yeah, that it's definitely sounds like at the same time you're balancing all of that, right? You're getting the validation, but you're filing for the protection. So there still is a bit of a balancing act there. So I'd love to kind of go down the line and do a bit of a lightning round and ask each of you, who was the first person outside of you or you and your co-founder who believed in what you were working enough to act on it? So that could be someone you hired, someone who invested, someone who wanted to buy your products or join your team, and just kind of like how that transformed the way that you thought of what you were building. I don't know if we want to start maybe at the end with Henry and then go down the line.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few answers that I could give this. I think the one that maybe sparked me the most was when we were just started to talk about the idea in the context of one of the Yale Ventures programs that is meant for customer discovery. So you're meant to go out and speak to people who might be your customers. You think they're your customers. You're supposed to basically understand, do they have the problem you think that they have? And just learn about them. And the funny thing was that before we had even spoken to like a quote unquote customer, which in this case was a patients we were speaking to, one of the organizers of the event like came up to us after it and said, actually, like, I have the problem you're working on, and was really interested in it. And I think that was the moment for me where it was like, oh, this is actually something that like is a real thing that somebody could use. And we've had a bunch of those moments where it's like we present to a big room of people. It tends to be older people who, where stuff comes up. But, they'll come up to us after, and it'll just be like incredibly validating to hear that. And so I think those moments there was early and often, but I think it's been really motivating for me.
The first person to believe in me was or make an impact on the organization was a teacher named Miss Lorenz, and our organization functions at clubs at different high schools, and the principal said no. And this teacher was like, hey, if you do this, this, and this, we could probably make it and go around the principal. And so now our organization we have over 1,500 student volunteers, and every one of them has access to a military mentor who's there to show them that sometimes it's important to break convention. And that's what entrepreneurship is a lot of the time. It's just breaking convention. And especially for kids, it's helpful when there's that one person who believes in you and your idea to step outside the lines.
That was very cute. Actually, the first person outside of me and my co-founder were like two people who I don't count because they always agree with me, my husband and sister. But the real person, so I don't know, you can probably imagine. So I'm from India, and our Indian government is made of really old men. And in a previous life, I was also working with the multilaterals, the UN and all of that. So I just randomly reached out to this one guy who was my boss at the time. And he was like, so what are you doing exactly these days? And I told him, PCOS. And I was just almost trying to get out of the conversation. And he's like, oh, really? Tell me more. And I said, okay, there are these hormones and things like that. And he was actually listening very intently. And he said, you know what? My wife is going through menopause. And, she has seen a ton of different doctors, and she has a ton of different things that she's going through. And I just cannot I just don't know how to help her. And I don't think she knows what she's doing. Do you want to talk to her? I was like, oh my God, uncle, yes, So I think that was, and then I talked to his wife, and obviously, she was one of our initial customers. And but I think like for me, it was like very significant to have a very, very old-fashioned, stodgy man, like really like get details about women's health and things and like engage with me on the topic.
Beautiful. Yeah. Paris.
For me, the first customer experiences are the most memorable as well, but I'll talk about when I made the first pivot. So I talked a little bit about being a like beauty and wellness marketplace in Pittsburgh, but during my time in the Techstars Startup Accelerator, we were building like that marketplace, and then one of our batchmates was like, oh, we're also building a marketplace, but we are having trouble figuring out how to build in split payments with Stripe and in-app chat and user authentication, all these things. So he was like one of our first customers when we pivoted into marketplace infrastructure, but that opened up our other first customers who are not friends, who are also in the space we were in. It was like 1871, I believe it was called. And they didn't know us, and they also heard about like that we were building this marketplace infrastructure software, and they're like, oh, we also need split payments, we also need scheduling. Can you please like let us license that software? That was the moment it like became real.
I think for both Jay and I, we're doing a lot of customer discovery right now, and I think talking to potential consumers has really helped us and really understanding, particularly for women's health, it's so deeply personal how devices have failed women and how we can tailor our product to really help women and help in the ways that previous devices have failed.
Thank you all. These are all such like touching stories. So we probably have time for one quick question, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask. Yeah.
So when it comes to actually getting your product or service out there, like partnership, what would you say would be like the biggest challenge that you face?
After you create a partnership, what's the biggest challenge? Communication, like keeping them up to date on what's going on, if anything changes, I think is really, really important for any partnership. And for your first partnership, sometimes setting those expectations in the beginning is not super clear. So that communication aspect becomes really important for keeping the relationship growing and evolving. Because things will definitely evolve, and especially for your early ones.
Yeah, anyone else want to add anything?
Could add something to that. In the nonprofit space, we work with a lot of like big companies, and they want to use us for our story, and they only really want to use us once. Like they want to say, we worked with them X time, and it's hard to keep that relationship going. And so I would say understanding your partner's incentives and trying to match your product or your offering to that. So like for us, we have to create a different story every time so that they have a reason to keep coming back. So trying to understand what they're getting out of the partnership and build yourself to over-deliver on that.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. Anytime you can really align incentives and understand what's driving their decision making and driving them. So that's great. Okay, do you want to ask something else? We might have time for one more question. Yeah. Yeah.
This is really, really amazing. I'm a founder, and now I'm working at the Harvard Office for the Arts. And one of the challenges that we're having that I'd love to get your thoughts or anybody's thoughts here is identity. Like, when was the moment that you identify yourselves as entrepreneurs, or you and your teams as entrepreneurs? Because our students, primarily as artists, identify as artists and creators, and sometimes our art has gone to go against capitalism. They make art to go against politics. So that's one of the mind shift and code switching that we're trying to understand so that we can better position our programs. And I'm just curious about if there was a moment or a process for you all to change that identity.
I can take one. I don't have the artist perspective here, but I'm from Porter Square, so I know you're part of the world. Great, and yeah, I mean, I think there's also like, are you guys high school students, or this row here seems okay? Cool. I was curious about This is the Yale College class. Anyway, I think like my answer will hopefully be broad enough for them and also for you. But I think like my biggest push is like, I think I was really hesitant to consider myself an entrepreneur for a really long time, because it does feel like you're kind of code switching into this identity that can be kind of intimidating, and also feel like it has baggage to it. And I think like the entrepreneurs that I think of first when I hear that word are kind of can be kind of nasty. Like, it can be very like acquisitive, and they're trying to basically further themselves at the expense of someone else. But I think for me, the reframing of it has been like twofold. Like, one is just really thinking about trying to do something new and trying to experiment. And like, I think what comes along with that is also taking all the pressure you can off of yourself and just making it kind of like a learning opportunity. And so I think for the high schoolers in the room, like, one of the things that I would recommend is like, just try things. And like, I think everything I've ever done that I would call now entrepreneurship, I did with basically zero expectations. I sort of thought I was going to fail. And then sometimes you get happily surprised, but in any event, you learn something. And I think that framing maybe makes it less sort of capitalist and like things that people might feel averse to, and more like, I'm just going to experiment and try to do something that touches other people or touches some problem. And so, I don't know, that's been really helpful framing for me, because it's made it less scary to like jump. And then I think the identity comes along somewhere along that road, but it's actually not important, right? In that sequence, like, I don't really care that I'm considered an entrepreneur or not.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us. And yeah, I know all of us will be around if anyone wants to chat more.
Thank you. Yeah. Here, because all that's
Don't worry.
I'm there for
I heard you guys did the whole spot. You're like, the high school like, oh, thank you. The cocktail reception at the side hall. We'll see you there. That's okay.